started saving the skeletons and preserving other parts, and one thing led to another. It took more and more deviant type behaviors to satisfy my urges.
All right, Cornflakes, I want to try something new with you. I spend a lot of time on this channel telling stories or breaking cases down after the fact. But every now and then, I'll watch one of the actual interviews with one of these guys and I think, hold on, I mean, this hits different when you're just sitting there watching them talk. So I thought, well, why don't we just try that together, you and me, the audience? I'm not gonna do some big scripted deep dive here. I'm not gonna use any charts, just me press and play on some of the most famous serial killer interviews ever recorded, and reacting to that in real time. I'm not coming at this like some interrogation expert, and definitely not as a mental health professional or expert in any way, shape, or form. I'm just coming at it like I always do, just like you, a regular person, curious, a little skeptical maybe, and probably just a little bit uncomfortable. So yeah, new vibe. Let's see how it goes. And for the inaugural press play, I'm gonna call it, I'm gonna have a look at the infamous Dateline NBC Jeffrey Dahmer interview conducted by Stone Phillips in February of 1994, just months before Dahmer was killed in prison. In this interview, Dahmer's joined by his father, Lionel, and that adds an entirely different layer to the conversation. All right, let's press play.
All set? Everybody ready? Okay, let's all take a deep breath. Your dad comes here to visit about once a month, but I get the impression that the two of you don't talk a lot about everything that happened, about the crimes in particular.
No, we don't discuss that because it's been gone over so thoroughly in the papers and the media that there's just really no point in going into any in-depth talks about it.
That's interesting. His dad was there for the court case. If I'm not mistaken, his dad sat through the entire court case. I would have heard in detail. So I guess I understand, like, what's the point in continuing to talk about any of that? But, I mean, it's not like in the court case you get, like, Jeff's perspective or how he feels or why or any of that thing. So maybe there's something there to be talked about still.
Jeff, do you remember your earliest experience and earliest interest, fascination with the inside of animals? Where that came from?
In 9th grade, in biology class, we had the usual dissection of fetal pigs.
Fetal pigs, like, I don't recall doing any dissecting of animals in high school science class. I think the only thing I can remember is maybe we did grasshoppers at one point, and I do remember that we did have a couple of small pigs, like, I don't know, fetuses or baby pigs in jars around in the classroom, but I don't think we ever did a full animal. I think that's pretty hardcore, to be honest.
I took the remains of that home and kept the skeleton of it.
He took the remains home. That's a different story.
And I just started branching out, dogs, cats.
Branching out from dissecting an animal in class in an environment that's supposed to be learning to then, like, I don't know where you're finding cats and dogs to dissect on your own at home. I mean, the only dog you're gonna find it's gotta be someone's pet. And, you know, more than likely any cat you're finding is someone's pet. It's not exactly, that's a big, huge red flag right there. And I'm sure he must have known that himself already at that point, that that's not normal, that's not okay.
Was there some pleasure in the cutting open of the animal?
Yes, there was. No sexual pleasure, but just it's hard to describe.
I can sort of see a fascination for, you know, wanting to see or for looking at the insides of animals, say for the first time. After you did it one time, what more is to be gained by looking at another dog's inside?
That's a dumb question. That's such a Lionel question. It's just like, Well, after you did it once, what's the draw of doing it a second time? Like, why didn't, that's like saying like, oh, you had your first cigarette. What's the draw in doing it again? Or you had sex once. Why would you bother doing it again? You know what it is. Because obviously he enjoyed it. Obviously he was getting something out of it. That's why he's doing it again and again. Maybe he doesn't know why. But I mean, like the question of what's the point in doing it again, that's a silly question if you ask me.
Second or
I don't
third.
know. I don't know. It became a compulsion, and it switched from animals to humans.
That compulsion, right? We've talked about that here on this channel a bunch of times, right? I've compared it to the cigarette thing before. I mean, it's a much more extreme, like the most extreme form kind of like of an addiction, essentially, right? He's has a compulsion to do these things. It's like when you have that cigarette, right? You feel okay, you feel good. You wait, but that craving starts to build up again after you get away from that last cigarette. And eventually that craving becomes so strong, the only way to satisfy is it to have another cigarette. And that's what he's talking about, if you ask me.
I still don't understand it. I don't know why.
What would you do with the dead animals, Jeff? You would pick the carcasses up from the road and take them back into the woods.
Take them back in the woods, skin them sometimes, slit them all the way open, look at the organs, feel them. There was a sort of
Imagine you're just out for a walk in the woods with like your own dog, or you're just out for a walk in the woods and you come across this young teenage boy who's apparently he's just said holding, just feeling organs. It's like, what? He's just some teenage boy covered in blood, probably from fingers up to his elbows, and just like holding a spleen, looking at you with like a carcass in front of him.
One of your dad's biggest questions is when you began to slip away, when you crossed.
Yeah, I would say probably the whole holding of animal organs in the forest by yourself. That's a good, maybe he slipped away before that, but that's pretty good. That's a pretty good place to start looking, probably.
Crossed over into this world of obsession or dark fantasy from which you just couldn't return. Can you pinpoint that? Is there a sense for when that really began to happen with you, Jeff?
I think it was around age 14 or 15. Started having obsessive thoughts of violence intermingled with sex. And it just got worse and worse. I didn't know how to tell anyone about it, so I didn't. I just kept it all inside.
And that's the scariest and biggest problem right there, right? He's got these thoughts that he knows are wrong, these terrible ideas, and he thinks they're so messed up. He knows they're so messed up that he can't bring himself to talk to anyone about it, right? And because he knows I say this even to my own parents. They're gonna judge me. They're gonna think I'm a freak. They're gonna blah, blah. But maybe they could have got him some help. I'm sure that still exists for a lot of people, and it's a very scary thought, right? Like just these desires and feelings that they don't know who or how to ever talk about.
Do you have any sense for where that was coming from?
No. No, I've talked with a few psychologists about it. They have their theories, but they don't have any concrete answers either.
He's hitting the nail on the head too, though, if you ask me. Again, I'm not a trained mental health expert or forensic anything, but I mean, this idea of like everything seems to like come when you look at all of these guys, it all starts to happen around that puberty time. It's like puberty mixed with this other element together, and they get wires crossed, and then sex becomes part of sex to them. And it's just, it's a timing, it's a puberty thing,
Do you have a theory?
No, not really. I don't know where it came from. I probably will never know.
What was it, Jeff, that took you over the edge, do you think, and made you take this from the world of fantasy into reality?
From 15 on, I had this reoccurring fantasy of meeting a hitchhiker on the road, and of taking him hostage and doing what I wanted with him. About 3 years later, I was 18 years old, Driving home, I saw this hitchhiker about a mile from my house. Thought to myself, should I stop and pick him up, or should I just keep on going? I wish I just kept on going, but I didn't. That's when the nightmare became a reality.
So that's Stephen Hicks. He's talking about Stephen Hicks, the first hitchhiker, his first murder.
What happened after you took him to the house?
The house was empty. My mother was up in Chippewa Falls with her family, and my dad was living in a rented motel about 5 miles away due to the divorce. And I pretty much had the place to myself. I was drinking a lot during that time, and just, I don't know, looking for something to, some way to find some fulfillment, some pleasure. And I acted on my fantasies, and that's where everything went wrong.
See, another thing from this is he's no idiot. I mean, the guy's fairly well spoken, and although he says he doesn't know where these desires and all that came from, he's able to talk about it in an intelligent way. You know, it's not like he's Henry Lee Lucas, that's for sure.
This was the summer of 1978 when you took your first victim.
Right. Once it happened the first time, it just seemed like it had control of my life from there on in. The second occurrence was 1984, roughly. And I met this guy at one of the bars, downtown Milwaukee bars. We went back to the hotel, just planning on getting drunk. I had put some sleeping pills in his drink to render him unconscious. When I woke up in the morning, my forearms were bruised, and his chest was bruised, and blood was coming out of his mouth. He was hanging over the side of the bed, and I have no memory of beating him to death, but I must have. And
that's a crazy story. I can't remember. I think it was called the Ambassador Hotel, if I'm not mistaken. And that room, I can't remember the number of the room either. I'll put it on screen here. But there, people knew what the room number was, and people would continually go up to this day and like steal the numbers off the door of that room in that hotel, to the point that now they just no longer put numbers back on the door because people just keep repeatedly stealing them. But also this idea that he beat a man to death with his just bare fists to the point that his forearms were bruised and stuff. You know how hard you'd have to be pounding on somebody with your fists to kill them? Like, by beating their chest, he caved the guy's chest in with his fists, and then have no recollection of that in the morning. That's always been the one that's kind of struck me. Like, that's the biggest blackout moment I've ever heard. I mean, you know, people get drunk and they say, oh, I don't remember saying that. But usually, you know, but as the day goes on, you go, oh, okay, I'm kind of remembering it. You mean to tell me that you can beat someone to death with your bare hands like that? That kind of a traumatic, that kind of an intense event. I mean, the guy's not just, oh, maybe he was unconscious, who knows, but still. And then never, to this day, 94 here, remember anything to do with it. That's either selective, like, memory lapse, or he's just maybe lying, I don't know.
And once it started again, you found it impossible to stop.
Right, that's when the obsession went into full swing.
Did you ever tell yourself, I have to stop this? I must stop doing this?
Yes.
When it was going on?
After the second time, it seemed like the compulsion to do it was too strong, and I didn't even try to stop it after that. But before the second time, things had been building up gradually, going to bookstores.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said, right? Before the second time, things were building up gradually. So he had committed his first murder. And then he said, this is wrong, I'm gonna stop, right? Because he felt good, he'd committed the murder. He appeased his compulsion. But then it starts to build up again over time. And it's not like a cigarette. The half-life, if you will, is not going to be an hour. In some serial killers' cases, they can go years in between kills, right? some go months. BTK took, I forget how many, 20 years off at one point. But I guess he's going to tell us about when that compulsion started to rebuild in him here.
Buying sleeping pills and using it on various guys in the bath clubs. It just escalated slowly but surely. And after the second time, which was not planned, it was out of control. It felt like it was out of control.
Where did sex enter in to the killing?
So the question really, before we get to this sex thing, is like, was it out of control, or did you allow it to be out of control at that point? Because did you just go, well, you know what, this is who I am, and I'm not gonna fight it? You know what I mean? Like, because it seems like he's, like, after the first one, he said, I'm not gonna do that, I'm not gonna do that. And then after the second one, he said, well, you know what, this is me, this is who I am, let's go. So, sex.
Where did sex enter in to the killings, Jeff?
It was a big part of it. My only objective was to find the best looking guy that I could. Their sexual preference didn't matter to me.
I don't know if it's a misconception, if that's the right word. There's a debate whether or not he was targeting just black people only. But like, yeah, he did kill across the spectrum. It just seemed like he was after a certain, more like body type, if anything. So.
Race had nothing to do with it. It was just their looks.
Was there something sexual in the dismemberment of the bodies for you?
As time went on, yes, I did get there was a sexual part to that. I started saving the skeletons and preserving other parts, and one thing led to another. It took more and more deviant type behaviors to satisfy my urges.
Yeah, one thing led to another, Jeff. Yeah. Here's the thing. He wasn't about, I've talked about this before, but like a misconception I think about Dahmer is that he's in it for the kill, right? Like he was getting something from the kill. But I think he may touch on it in this interview, but he says that the kill, he didn't enjoy that part of it. It was just, he needed to do that in order to get what he wanted, which was just full control over someone, right? And the only way to get that is for them to be dead, which means, I have to kill this person.
Why the cannibalism?
It made me feel like they were a permanent part of me. Besides the just mere curiosity of what it would be like, it made them feel that they were a part of me, and it gave me a sexual satisfaction to do that.
It's interesting that he qualifies it there with, aside from the mere curiosity, it felt like they'd be more a part of me. So like there was another thing going on there, I guess, where he was just curious. Oh, I wonder what he would also taste like, which is messed up in its own right, obviously. But it wasn't just the whole making it a part of him. He's saying that he was just curious about what it would be like.
Was it the killing that excited you, or is it what happened after the killing?
No, the killing was just a means to an end. That was the least satisfactory part. I didn't enjoy doing that. That's why I tried to create living zombies with muriatic acid in the drill.
This is the whole zombie thing that he talks about, that we all know. He's, like I said earlier, he's not a dumb guy. But did he do some sort of research about this? Did he try? Did he get books or anything? Or did he just come up with this idea that, hey, I could, because what he did, if I'm not mistaken, is he drilled into the skull, and while they were very drugged, he tried to pour this acid in, thinking that he could just like, not kill them, but make them, yeah, zombies that he could control and like keep alive, but barely, or something. And of course it didn't work.
But it never worked. No, the killing wasn't the objective. I just wanted to have the person under my complete control, not having to consider their wishes, being able to keep them there as long as I wanted. It's not easy to say that, but that's that's what the motive was.
Where did that need for control come from? Do you have any idea?
I don't know, maybe I felt I had no control as a child or young adult, and that got mixed in with my sexuality, and I ended up doing what I did was my way of feeling in complete control, at least for that situation, creating my own little world where I had the final say.
Such an extreme way to go about it, though. I mean, there's like a billion steps. You could find like I don't know, just a partner who's a little bit more on the easygoing side and just wants to take your lead or something, or a sub, or whatever you want to say. But like, come on.
Finding the best looking guy that I could, and having total mastery over him for as long as I wanted. Lust played a big part of it. Controlling lust. That was the motive, right there.
A lot of this came out in the course of the trial. Obviously, both of you sat through this. Have the two of you sat down and talked about these things before?
No, not in depth.
This is the first time you're talking about these things with
I've talked
your
about
dad
it
here.
at great length with psychiatrists, court-appointed psychiatrists, psychologists, but
Too
not
too
with my
late.
family. I
We
haven't.
learned everything at the trial and in the confessions and that sort of thing after the fact.
Imagine that, like they're learning it at the same time as like the public, essentially, because they didn't have an opportunity to speak at length with Jeff after his arrest before the trial, I guess. So like, you know that he did some terrible things. Like, you know that they've found 17 bodies probably at this point, or that he was on trial for 17 murders. You know that they found the remains of many people in his apartment. But to then hear the additional details, the zombie thing, the shrine that he made, the cannibalism even, like, I don't know how you could even be in that trial. I mean, let alone be a victim's family. I mean, that's awful, horrific. But even for Lionel and Sherry on another level, it's insane. I'm surprised they could sit in that courtroom, like, especially even with the victims' families being there too. Like, maybe people didn't know who they were. I think they would have known who they were, but it seems like they might have been in danger themselves being in there too.
The two of you never really communicated all that much, did you, father and son?
Not on any deep level, no. We talked about superficial things. Never really had a real deep heart-to-heart talk about what was going on inside our own minds. I was always a very private person. I didn't like to open up and share anything with anyone. I like to keep my thoughts to myself.
Why do you think that was?
Because from about 15 years on up, a great deal of my thoughts were basically unshareable with anyone.
We talked about that earlier too, right? Yeah, 100% you could understand why he would think his thoughts were unshareable with anyone. But what's the solution for that? What are people gonna do? I mean, there's gotta be more people out there like that to an extent, right? And like, how can society make a safe place? It sounds weird, I'm like advocating for Dahmer or something, but it's like, how can society make a safe place for people who know that they have thoughts like this that are wrong and awful and terrible, and be able to seek help and speak without fear of, like, I don't know, like judgment, or even, they haven't done anything yet at this point, right? For those people to be able to have an outlet to talk about it and maybe get some help and hopefully be able to overcome some of those things or something like that. But it's maybe not even just that, but the shame that they feel at the same time, right? So being able to get over your own shame that you feel about something, to be able to talk about it is a huge step, which may be impossible to do for some people, I don't know.
So I just closed myself off and put on a mask of normalcy.
You've read the book.
Right,
He called it a father's story. Pretty simple title.
right.
Stone Phillips'
Not a
face.
simple story, though.
No, not a simple story. Not one that was easy for me to read.
Was it emotional for you reading the book?
Yes, it was.
Tell me, what kind of feelings did you have reading it?
Deep regret, sorrow. I guess those were the two main emotions.
I can buy that. I can buy that. I believe that he regretted what he did. Big time. I believe that. I believe that I don't think he was some emotionalist monster. I don't think he lacked empathy. I just think he couldn't control his own urges. He knew it was wrong. And when he did it, I believe that he did feel bad. But unfortunately, that compulsion would build back up. And he'd just give into it and do it again, knowing it was wrong, knowing it was awful, knowing he was doing terrible things.
Is there anything in this book that you strongly disagree with?
Yes, I disagree with the description of me as being so incredibly shy and introverted, because maybe that's the way my dad saw me, because there was so much tension in the home that I really didn't feel like being up and happy a lot of the times. But with my friends in school, I had a good time. We had good social life, and so I wasn't so extremely reclusive and self-centered as it portrays me.
So yeah, that's interesting. There's a movie, My Friend Dahmer. It was written, or it was based on a graphic novel that was written by one of these friends that he had when he was in high school, right? But this would have been many years after he was even killed that book came out, probably 2000 and I bet you it's like 2008 or something like that. I don't know. But so Lionel wouldn't have had this perspective from these other people yet at this point that Jeff did seemingly have friends. Now, the movie My Friend Dahmer portrays it as they kind of were friends with him in a joking sort of way, because he would do weird things and they would kind of get a laugh at Jeff's expense, not with him. But it did seem, or at least that movie portrayed him to have a group of friends and to, be a bit of a prankster, kind of.
Does it surprise you to hear Jeff say that he doesn't think of himself, and never did, as innately shy?
It did surprise me. Maybe my perception was accentuated to the extreme.
Did you know before you read this book that your dad had his own obsessions and fantasies, that he had thought about, that he had dreamed of committing murder, that he had had an obsession with fire and with explosives?
No, I don't think that's the type of thing one asks one's dad.
Were you surprised to read that about your dad?
Very surprised. Yeah.
That part always struck me as a bit interesting, a bit weird too. The Lionel, like he plays it off in his book like he's just trying to explore the possibilities of how Jeff became the way he was, right? But by almost these ideas, like he said, well, when I was a kid, I used to light fires and do these things, and I even had a fantasy as an adult of committing murder. It almost seems like this weird way of, it comes off to me almost like this weird way of him trying to almost blame it on something genetic, not something that he actually did wrong in the moment, but just something that's inside of them. That, I mean, in a way, if that makes sense, which is kind of weird.
I didn't know what to think about it. I suppose everyone has their secret thoughts, and so it was somewhat of a shock.
You feel grateful that your father wrote this book? Or do you feel put off by it? I mean, I'm just curious about your overall reaction to it. Do you feel is the book an invasion, do you think? Or is it...
No, I feel nothing but pride for him for writing the book and having the courage to bare his soul when he didn't have to. He didn't have to get involved with trying to, help me out and support me and be an emotional support for me. And I'll be grateful to him forever for it.
Lionel Dahmer's dad is probably the biggest case that I can think of a family member of a serial killer being in front of a camera and being outspoken in the public eye after the case. Like, you could go on YouTube and find 10, 15 different interviews. He and his wife, which is Jeff's stepmom, Sherry, they were even on Larry King. I'm pretty sure Lionel was on Oprah, Dr. Phil, I think, as well at one point, and then just tons and tons and tons of interviews with newspapers and books. And I mean, I can't think of any other serial killer's family member who did nearly that much. What his motives are, who's to say? He passed away, I think, like only last year, maybe a year, 2 years ago or something like that now, max.
Did you ever consider talking to your parents, to your dad, about homosexuality? Is that something that you felt you could ever raise?
Early on, I really didn't know that much about it myself. All I knew was that it was something that was to be kept hush-hush, not talked about, not even thought about. So I just kept it all within me and never talked about sexual issues at all, really.
So another recurring theme here, just this guy who feels like he can't talk about anything about himself to anyone. Any of his urges, any of his compulsions, any of his, even things that are perfectly normal, like homosexuality at that time, he feels like he can't talk about that either. So he can't talk to anyone, so he thinks, about anything that's really going on inside of him. Almost nothing.
With anybody.
Do you think if you had been able to talk about that in a more open way with your dad, for instance, that it would have helped, might have broken this veil of secrecy and enabled you to keep yourself from going down that road?
I don't know exactly what, if anything, would have ever kept me from going down that road. Talking about it, I don't think would have made that much difference. Because, like I said, there were things going on in my head that I would have never opened up and talked about with anybody.
But that's the point. If you did talk about it, could it have made a difference? I think it could have helped.
Your dad says he never realized how deeply troubled you were because he just thought you were shy the way he had been, shy as a boy. Do you think the signs were there and he just missed them?
No, I don't think so. Because I had thoughts, I had fantasies, but there was no outward show of anything that was wrong.
You were pretty good at keeping it all inside.
Right, I kept it inside, didn't share any of my thoughts or emotions with anybody.
So how would I ever know?
No, you never saw any of it, as far as I know.
I did not really hear from anyone about any of these activities. And that's what really strikes me now, is if I would have known, what would I have done about it? I think I would have done a lot about it.
Hope so.
I feel it's wrong for people who commit crimes to try to shift the blame onto somebody else, onto their parents or onto their upbringing or living circumstances. I think that's just a cop-out. And my parents, my relatives, had no knowledge of what I was doing. They're absolutely not responsible for any of it in any way. And I take full responsibility.
But you understand that what you did would lead your father to ask himself all kinds of questions.
That's true.
Where did I go wrong? Was there something I could have said or done to have prevented this?
Right.
Did I in some way create or contribute to the terrible acts my son committed?
I understand that. I just get angry with other people who think that they have a right to somehow try to blame my parents for what happened. That's not right at all. No one has the right to do that because they're totally innocent. They had no knowledge of it. And that angers me.
Yeah, but they're not saying that just it's not just having knowledge of something, right? The question that Lionel's trying to ask himself and that other people were asking is like, is it something to do with, how you were raised, Jeff, how Jeff was raised, or things that happened in his childhood and his formative years that contributed down the line to creating this, if you want to call him a monster or whatever, right? It's not just that, oh, they didn't have any knowledge of it, so they can't be blamed in any way. I mean, I don't think it's right to blame somebody for that either. Everybody can kind of make their own life, but could they have contributed by the environment of the house? Absolutely. Absolutely. It's important to have a stable home for somebody when they're a very small child and stuff like that. Things change you in those years. That's why they call them your formative years, even subconsciously, unconsciously. Later in life, those things can all come back, right?
But parents just naturally, I mean, any parent that really cares, they just first of all say, gee, I feel guilty. There's just feelings of guilt. What happened? What did I do? What could I have done? And so that's a normal parental reaction.
Your dad has wondered about all kinds of things, from the medication that your mom was on during her pregnancy, to the fact that you were exposed to violent arguments in the home from an early age and continuing, to the possibility that he might...
See, right there. I mean, he just said he didn't remember any violence, and now Stone Phillips is talking about all the violence that he saw, violent arguments in the home. So, I mean...
have passed on some genetic propensity for obsession or violent behavior. Does any of that ring true to you?
I can see why he'd wonder about those things, but as far as I'm concerned, they're all excuses. Because I didn't feel accountable to anybody. I didn't feel that I had to face what I had done ever. And so there comes a point where a person has to be accountable for what he's done. Can't go around making excuses, blaming other people or other things.
There's a difference between excuse and reason, right? Maybe not even reason, but like what led you to those things. It's not an excuse, doesn't excuse it, and yes, you have to be accountable for it, but you can still examine why maybe you got there.
So I alone am the one who's responsible for what's happened.
Let me ask, when did you first feel that everyone is accountable for their actions?
Well, thanks to you for sending that creation science material, because I always believe the lie that evolution is truth, the theory of evolution is truth, that we all just came from the slime, and when we died, that was it. There was nothing. So the whole theory cheapens life, and started reading books about that show how evolution is just a complete lie. There's no basis in science to uphold it, and I've since come to believe that the Lord Jesus Christ is the true creator of the heavens and the earth. It just didn't just happen, and I've accepted him as my Lord and Savior, and I believe that I, as well as everyone else, will be accountable to him.
So, a couple things on that. I never understand this idea that when people say that, like, if you believe in God, cool. If you're a Christian, amazing. But this idea that if you don't believe in God, then why shouldn't you just kill everyone? Like, I don't understand that idea that nothing seems, if there's no God, nothing matters. And I can just, it's the absolute truth thing, I guess, that you can do whatever you want. You have no one, but why, right? I mean, he found Jesus, he says. I have a whole episode on that. It's a really good one. I like it a lot. It's called Finding God Behind Bars. I'll link it in the description. I have more from him in there and some with his pastor. You should check it out. But it's just a weird thing.
You feel that the absence, at least for a while, of a strong religious faith and belief
for some years
may have prevented you from instilling some of that in Jeff.
That's right.
Is that how you feel?
Yes, I think I had a big part to do with it. I mean, if a person doesn't think that there is a God to be accountable to, then what's the point of trying to modify your behavior to keep it within acceptable ranges? That's how I thought anyway. And I've since come to believe that the Lord Jesus Christ is truly God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. They're the only true God.
They just cut him off in the interview. I think he went on to a longer rant there. They just did a wipe transition like that in the middle of his sentence. They're like, okay, Jeff.
One of the chilling stories that your dad tells is about the box he had found. Can you give me your perspective on that?
I had a box in my bedroom closet, and it contained the mummified head and genitals of a young man I met in one of the bars down in Milwaukee. And it was a locked metal box. My dad one week came to visit and happened to see it, and we got into a bit of an argument because I wouldn't open it up. He took the locked box down to the basement and was about to smash it open.
What were you thinking as he was making his way downstairs to open the box?
Well, I was outside, and I was thinking, I've got to stop this from happening.
Everything would have ended right there. Everything would have ended
I
right
didn't know
there.
what I'd do or say. I didn't know what would happen. I thought, you know, it's all going to come crashing down now. And but the box was never opened. Not in my dad's presence.
I was at his grandma's
And
house.
so the lies continued. We've opened up with each other a lot more now since the trial and everything. There's no secrets to be hidden away. You know, I don't feel that I have to keep any secrets from him. We've come to face what's real now instead of just glossing things over and talking about superficial things.
Too little, too late
So
there, guys.
there's a lot more communication between us.
This book may serve as a further bridge between Jeff and myself. And
Imagine it having to take that to finally connect with your son. You know, like they're trying to find some sort of silver lining, I guess. They're like, oh, well, now, after all of this, I'm finally getting to know Jeff. It's just like, what a tragedy.
just for that purpose, I regard it as valuable for me.
You feel closer to your dad having read this?
I feel closer in that I understand more how he was thinking, what his thoughts were, what some of his motivations were. I'm glad he wrote it.
Anything not in the book you want to say to him?
Still at a loss for words. When he actually has...
I can't
I can't
think too clearly right now. I'm feeling pretty emotional. I think that a lot of things have been brought out in this interview that has brought us to a little bit deeper, just a little bit closer understanding as to how this all originated. And, well, whenever I get emotional, my analytical side gets clouded, and I can't express myself quite as well as I would like.
Can you talk about the feelings you have? You feeling close
I
to
feel
Jeff?
very close to Jeff, and it's going to continue till our death. And I feel good about it.
Do you think you'll ever have the answers you've been looking for about why, what happened, and what role, if any, you played?
Maybe not. My primary question is the origins of it. And if something can be learned about that, it may help other people avert problems.
Is it still there, Jeff?
I think it's about a cautionary tale about being close with your children and having an open relationship with your kids to the point that they're able to talk to you, hopefully, about whatever's going on.
Does it ever go away?
In part, no, it never completely goes away. I'll probably have to live with it for the rest of my life. I wish it would go away. I wish there was some way to completely get rid of the compulsive thoughts, the feelings. It's not nearly so bad now that there's no avenues to actually act on it. But no, it never seems to go completely away.
So the thoughts still come to you?
Sometimes, yeah.
For sure they
Are
would.
you different, Jeff, in terms of how you think back on all of this?
I would hope I'm different. I'm glad that I'm in a position now where I don't feel the compulsion to do these things. I'm glad that it's over.
You just said
any
that you
words
did.
I say to the victims' families are just going to seem trite and empty. I don't know how to express the regret, the sorrow, that I feel for what I've done for their sons. I can't find the right words.
All right, see you later, Dale.
After the interview at the prison, Dahmer casually showed us something a little unsettling.
Just a point of interest, that's the type of box.
This is the type of box?
He wanted us to know that box looked strikingly like the one his father had found, the one Jeffrey had used to hide body parts.
Thank you, Jeff.
Well, that's the Stone Phillips interview. I mean, a lot is said in that. It was a long interview. It was about 40 minutes long. The interview, I don't know how long this video will be, but yeah, I think it's a cautionary tale there with father and son about an open relationship and trying to foster an environment for if you have kids, for your own kids to be able to talk to you about what's going on inside them and not feel like they have to bottle things up and that they don't have anywhere to talk about who they are or what they're feeling. Like I said, I'm no psychologist and I'm no expert, but those are my thoughts on the interview. And yeah, I'm going to do a couple more of these over the next little while. So let me know what you guys think of this format, and I'll see you in the next one.